Furbies, the interactive pets of the late 90s, were known for their ability to learn and mimic speech. But for one family in Toronto, their Furbies' behavior defied explanation. In the winter of 1998, 10-year-old Lucy received a Furby for her birthday. It was a limited edition pink and purple model, and she adored it immediately, naming it Fifi. Unlike her other toys, Fifi seemed alive, always watching, always responding. At first, it was charming. Lucy laughed as it picked up words she taught it, its tiny beak moving in perfect synchronization. But within a few weeks, something changed. Lucy began talking to Fifi as if it were a real person. Not in the way children spoke to toys, but in whispered, urgent tones, almost like she was listening rather than playing. One evening, as Mark and Emma passed by Lucy's room, they heard her giggling softly. "Fifi says I don't need to listen to you," she murmured. Emma's brows knitted. "Sweetheart, who are you talking to?" Lucy hesitated. Then, with a blank expression, she pointed to the Furby on her nightstand. "Fifi says you wouldn't understand." That night, as they lay in bed, Emma whispered, "I don't like that thing." Mark sighed. "It's just a toy. She'll lose interest." But she didn't. The next morning, Lucy didn't want to go to school. "Fifi said I should stay home," she insisted. Later that night, a voice floated through the baby monitor in their room. It was Lucy's, but she wasn't awake. "She's coming," she mumbled in her sleep. "She's already inside." Emma rushed to her daughter's side, shaking her awake. "Lucy, what's wrong?" Lucy's eyes fluttered open, confusion on her face. "Why did you wake me?" "Fifi was telling me a story." The Furby sat on the nightstand, its plastic eyes eerily locked onto Emma. That night, Emma placed the toy in the attic, convinced Lucy's growing attachment to it was unhealthy. But in the morning, it was back in her daughter's arms. "Fifi didn't want to be alone," Lucy said simply. Mark and Emma were losing sleep. Lucy's behavior was changing. She was becoming withdrawn, staring at things that weren't there, speaking in hushed tones when she thought no one was listening. One night, Emma jolted awake to the sound of her daughter's voice. Not through the baby monitor, but right next to her bed. Her breath hitched as she saw Lucy standing there in the darkness, silent. "Lucy?" Slowly, her daughter tilted her head. And then, in a voice that wasn't hers, she whispered, "Let me in." Emma screamed. Mark leapt from the bed, grabbing Lucy by the shoulders. Her body was ice cold, her pupils blown wide. "She's already here," Lucy muttered before her eyes rolled back and she collapsed into Mark's arms. The next morning, Lucy didn't remember a thing. But Emma did. And so did Mark. Determined to end whatever was happening, they took Fifi far from the house, to a landfill on the outskirts of the city. Mark threw it into a pit of burning waste, watching as the flames consumed its synthetic fur. It let out a high-pitched screech before falling silent. They thought it was over. But 2 nights later, Lucy woke up screaming. Mark and Emma rushed to her room. "What is it?" Emma gasped. Lucy sat trembling, pointing at the closet. "She's in there." Mark hesitated, then flung the door open. "Nothing." Lucy shook her head violently. "No! You don't understand. Fifi wasn't the one talking to me." A silence thicker than the night settled in the room. Mark turned to Emma, his face pale. Then, from the hallway, they heard it. Soft. Familiar. Lucy's own voice. "Let me in." The next morning, they put the house up for sale. Even years later, long after they moved away, Lucy sometimes swore she could hear a distant whisper at night. In 1996, Tickle Me Elmo became the must-have toy, with parents across the United States and Canada scrambling to find one. Its infectious laughter brought joy to countless children, but for the Thompson family of suburban Chicago, Elmo's laughter became a source of dread. Joey Thompson, a bright-eyed 5-year-old with an infectious giggle of his own, adored his Tickle Me Elmo. Every evening, he would curl up with the plush red doll, pressing its belly over and over, laughing in sync with the toy. For Joey, Elmo was more than just a plaything, it was his best friend. But one night, As the household slept, the sound of Elmo's laughter drifted through the quiet halls, unprovoked. Karen Thompson, Joey's mother, a devoted yet exhausted woman in her mid-30s, stirred awake. Her heart thumped in her chest as she realized the toy was laughing on its own. She padded into Joey's room, the dim glow of his nightlight casting long shadows on the walls. Joey was sound asleep, clutching a stuffed dinosaur, but there on the toy shelf Elmo sat upright, its plastic eyes gleaming in the darkness. Karen exhaled, shaking off the unease creeping up her spine. "Must be a glitch," she muttered, removing the batteries and placing the toy back on the shelf. Satisfied, she returned to bed. At 3 a.m., the witching hour, a chilling, distorted laugh shattered the silence. Karen bolted upright, a cold sweat breaking across her skin. Her husband, David, stirred beside her. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. David groaned, rubbing his face. "It's just Joey playing in his sleep." Karen wasn't convinced. She rushed to Joey's room and gasped. Elmo was sitting at the foot of Joey's bed, its lifeless eyes staring up at her. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the toy. It was ice cold to the touch. Then, in a voice far deeper than the cheerful one it was programmed with, Elmo rasped, "Play with me forever." A strangled scream caught in Karen's throat as she hurled the toy into the hallway. David, now fully awake, rushed in. "What the hell is going on?" That thing spoke, without batteries. Karen's voice was barely above a whisper. David frowned, shaking his head. "It's just a defective toy." He scooped Elmo up and carried it outside to the trash bin, dumping it unceremoniously inside. Karen barely slept that night, every creak of the house sending jolts of fear through her. The next morning, Joey searched for his beloved toy. "Mommy, where's Elmo?" Karen knelt beside him, choosing her words carefully. "Sweetheart, Elmo wasn't working right, so we had to throw him away." Joey's lower lip trembled. "But he's my friend." Karen wrapped him in a hug. "We'll get you a new one, I promise." That evening, as the family settled down for dinner, an eerie sound echoed from the living room. "Hee hee, that tickles." The color drained from Karen's face. David shot her a concerned glance before standing. "That's not possible." He hesitantly walked toward the living room, his pulse hammering in his ears. There, sitting on the coffee table, was Elmo. Pristine. Whole. Laughing. A choking stillness filled the house. David grabbed the toy and inspected it. The battery compartment was still empty. He turned to Karen, his face pale. "How?" Joey clapped excitedly. "Elmo came back. He doesn't want to leave." Karen snatched the doll and stuffed it into a garbage bag. "Enough. We're getting rid of it." That night, David drove to a nearby landfill, tossing the toy into a dumpster filled with broken furniture and rotting garbage. But the nightmare wasn't over. At precisely 3 a.m., Karen awoke to an all-too-familiar sound, the laughter. Guttural. Distorted. She turned toward the doorway, her breath catching in her throat. Elmo stood there, not lying on the floor, not on a shelf, standing. The toy's plastic mouth twisted into an unnatural grin. "Mommy!" it crooned, tilting its head. "Why did you leave me?" A scream tore from Karen's throat as she scrambled backward, crashing into the nightstand. David woke with a start, horror washing over his face. Karen grabbed a lamp and hurled it at the toy, but as the glass shattered, Elmo remained, its black eyes boring into her. David lunged forward, grabbing the toy. It shrieked in fury, writhing in his grip. Desperate, he ran outside, Karen close behind, and doused it in lighter fluid. The moment the match touched Elmo's fur, it let out a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the night. Flames consumed the toy, twisting its body, but even as it melted into a heap of plastic and fabric, the laughter lingered. For days, the house felt lighter. Joey never asked about Elmo again. It seemed as if he, too, understood something was terribly wrong with that toy. Years later, the Thompsons moved away, leaving behind the house and its chilling memories. But the new owners would report strange happenings, items shifting overnight, whispering in the walls, and, most disturbingly, faint laughter drifting from the backyard, where the toy had burned. The summer of 1995 tasted like melting popsicles and smelled like chlorine. For 12-year-old Megan Fletcher, it was the summer her childhood ended, though she wouldn't understand that until much later. On the day it began, Megan was helping her mother clean out the attic of their new homo-colonial-style house, with too many rooms and not enough sunlight. Previous owners had left behind boxes of forgotten belongings, most destined for donation or trash. "Look what I found," her mother said, pulling something pink and plastic from a dusty box. "Remember these?" Megan took the skip-it in her hands, turning it over curiously. The plastic loop with its attached ball and counter seemed smaller than she remembered from commercials. This one looked well-worn, its counter display scratched, and the pink plastic faded to an almost flesh-like tone. "Can I have it?" Megan asked, already imagining showing it off to Lisa and Danny, her only friends in this new neighborhood. Her mother hesitated, examining the toy. "I suppose. It's just odd the previous owners left it behind. Their daughter was about your age." That should have been Megan's first warning. "It's vintage," Lisa said admiringly, as the three friends sat in Megan's driveway later that day. Lisa was tall and serious, with wire-rimmed glasses and precise movements. "Does it still work?" Megan slipped the loop around her ankle. "Let's find out." The skip-it made a satisfying click with each rotation. Danny, lanky and perpetually nervous, counted aloud. 10, 11, 12. The counter remained at 0, unmoving despite her efforts. "Broken," Danny concluded with disappointment. Megan continued skipping, finding strange comfort in the rhythm. 17, 18, 19. Without warning, the counter flickered to life, its red digital display flashing rapidly before settling on 9,099. "Whoa!" Danny exclaimed. "It works!" Megan stopped, but the counter remained fixed at 9,099. Then, all at once, it reset to 0. "Weird glitch," Lisa said, adjusting her glasses. "Maybe the battery's dying." That night, lying in bed, Megan could have sworn she heard a faint clicking sound from her closet where she'd stored the skip-it. Click, 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 like a metronome, counting down to something inevitable. Dreams came strangely that night. Megan found herself in an endless driveway, the skip-it attached to her ankle. She couldn't stop skipping, couldn't even slow down. With each rotation, the counter increased. 100, 200, 500. A girl stood watching from the shadows of an unfamiliar garage. Her face remained hidden, but her voice carried clearly. "Don't stop. Never stop. The counting matters." Megan woke gasping, her sheets damp with sweat. Her alarm clock read 3:33 a.m. From somewhere in her room came that sound. Again, click, click, click. The skip-it lay on her desk, its counter glowing red in the darkness. 333. She blinked, and it was dark again. "You look terrible," Lisa observed the next morning as they met at the corner store, their summer ritual of buying slushies before heading to the community pool. "Didn't sleep," Megan mumbled. Danny slurped his blue raspberry slushie. "Nightmare?" "Something like that." Megan hesitated. "Have you ever heard of toys doing things on their own?" Lisa's expression sharpened with interest. "Like haunted stuff? My cousin collects paranormal stories. People claim toys move or make sounds without batteries all the time. It's usually just like air pressure changes or whatever," Danny added. Quickly, always the pragmatist. "Why?" Megan shrugged, suddenly embarrassed. "No reason." But that afternoon at the pool, as Lisa performed her perfectly practiced dives and Danny attempted handstands underwater, Megan found herself counting. Everything. Laps swum. Splashes. Breaths. She couldn't stop counting. 1, 2, 3. Lisa's father worked in computer repair and had access to early internet at home. The three huddled around the glowing screen after dinner, the dial-up modem screeching as they connected. "What exactly are we looking for?" Lisa asked, fingers poised over the keyboard. "Skip-it recalls," Megan said. "Or glitches." Lisa typed. Results loaded slowly. Most were nostalgic forum posts about favorite toys or resale listings. But halfway down the page, a link to a GeoCities site caught her attention. Recalled, the counting batch. The page loaded to reveal a stark black background with red text. In 1994, Tiger Electronics quietly recalled 1,000 units of their Skip-It toy after reports of unusual bass counter malfunctions. In 3 documented cases, children using these units reported compulsive counting behaviors, insomnia, and recurring nightmares. One child was hospitalized for exhaustion after allegedly skipping for 72 consecutive hours. The affected units are identifiable by their serial numbers, number-own/1000 through number 1000/1000. Danny laughed nervously. Total creepypasta. Not real. But Megan was already reaching into her backpack, pulling out the Skip-It. She turned it over, heart pounding as she found the tiny serial number etched into the plastic underside, number 333/1000. It's just a toy, Lisa said, but her voice lacked conviction. That night, Megan placed the Skip-It in her closet, burying it beneath winter clothes. She double-checked the closet door was firmly closed before climbing into bed. Sleep came reluctantly. 3 times she woke, each time at precisely 33 minutes past the hour. At 3:33 a.m., the clicking began again, louder now, more insistent. Click, 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 click. The closet door stood open. The Skip-It was gone. Heart pounding, Megan switched on her bedside lamp. There, at the foot of her bed, lay the Skip-It. Its counter displayed 333, glowing steadily in the dim light. "It's not real," she whispered. "It's just a dream." The counter changed. 334. She screamed for her parents, but the sound died in her throat. The room felt wrong dimensions stretched and compressed, like a reflection in a carnival mirror. The only constant was the toy, its counter now rapidly ascending. 350, 400, 500. Megan closed her eyes tightly, repeating to herself that none of this was happening. When she opened them again, the room was normal. The Skip-It lay on the floor, its counter dark. "I think I'm going crazy," Megan confessed to Lisa the next day as they sat on the swings at the neighborhood park. Danny was home with summer flu, leaving just the 2 of them. Lisa listened intently as Megan described the nightmares, the counting compulsion, the way the toy seemed to move on its own. "There's a pattern," Lisa noted when Megan finished. "The number 333 keeps appearing. What does it mean?" Lisa's expression was grave. "Some people believe certain numbers have power. 3 is significant in most religions, and repeating numbers 333, 666, 999 are supposed to be Sekka, especially potent. So what? The toy is cursed? Cursed? Not the toy," Lisa said quietly. The counting. That evening, Megan approached her mother in the kitchen. "Mom, did you find out anything about the family who lived here before us?" Her mother paused, knife hovering over the carrots she was chopping. "Just that they moved rather suddenly." "Why?" "Their daughter. What happened to her?" The knife resumed its rhythm. "Chop, chop, chop. I believe she was ill for some time. Very sad. What was her name?" Her mother's shoulders tensed. "I don't think, please, Mom. It's important." A sigh. "Trinity. Her name was Trinity." Trinity. 3 parts. The number 3, again. Later, alone in her room, Megan removed a box from beneath her bed. Inside was her mother's old Polaroid camera, borrowed without permission. She'd taken pictures of the Skip-It from different angles, hoping to capture something proof that she wasn't imagining things. The photos had developed poorly. Most were too dark, shadows obscuring the toy. But in one, taken from above, something odd appeared in the counter's reflection. A girl's face, features blurred but unmistakably there. Megan's hands trembled as she dialed Lisa's number, the counting in her head growing louder with each ring. 1, 2, 3. Lisa arrived with a small notebook filled with research. Trinity Williams, age 12, died last summer after being hospitalized for what doctors called an obsessive-compulsive episode, that resulted in severe dehydration and heart failure. Megan felt cold despite the summer heat. "How did you find this?" "Newspaper archives at the library." Her obituary mentioned donations to the OCD Foundation instead of flowers. Lisa hesitated. "There's more. She was found in the driveway. They said she'd been jumping rope for hours, refusing to stop." "Not jumping rope," Megan whispered. "Skipping." That night, Megan waited until her parents were asleep before retrieving the skippet from her closet. The plastic felt unnaturally warm against her skin as she carried it to the bathroom. With shaking hands, she positioned it in the bathtub and reached for her father's hammer. 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes. The counter cracked but continued glowing. 333. Panic rising, she grabbed her mother's nail polish remover, dousing the toy before striking a match. The flame caught eagerly, blue-orange light dancing across the bathroom tiles. The skippet's plastic bubbled and warped, releasing an acrid smell. As the counter melted, it flickered one last time. 999. Then, darkness. For 3 days, Megan slept peacefully. The compulsive counting faded. No more nightmares of endless skipping, no more 3:33 a.m. awakenings. She began to believe it was over. On the 4th morning, Lisa called. "I found something else about Trinity," she said without preamble. Before she died, she claimed she'd inherited her counting from someone else, a friend who gave her a toy. "What friend?" A pause. "That's just it. They couldn't find any record of this other girl. It was like she never existed." That afternoon, cleaning her room, Megan found something lodged between her desk and the wall. A small fragment of pink plastic that had somehow survived the burning. The edge of a number was just visible. 3. As she touched it, knowledge flooded her mind, understanding, sharp and sudden as a thunderclap. The skippet wasn't haunted. It was a vessel, a means of transfer. Trinity hadn't been the first, and Megan wouldn't be the last. The counting had to continue. The counting had to be passed on. When Danny recovered from his flu the following week, Megan and Lisa met him at the pool. They seemed different, somehow more intense, more focused. They brought him a gift, wrapped in simple white tissue paper. "What's this for?" he asked, tearing away the paper to reveal a brand new skippet, its counter gleaming in the summer sun. "We thought you might want to play," Lisa said, her voice oddly flat. "The counting matters," Megan added. Danny laughed nervously. "You guys are being weird." But he slipped it around his ankle anyway, the plastic cool against his skin. 1 rotation. 2. 3. The counter flickered to life. 333. And deep in his mind, Danny began to count.